Presenting today is Taylor Schorsch and Sarah Smith. This training is required for anyone interested in participating in the local Food for Schools program. An assign-in sheet will be posted in the chat box at the end of this presentation. On the next slide, we will review the agenda and topics being presented today. If you have any questions from the webinar, please type them into the chat box and we will review them at the end. A recording of the webinar will be posted in the training section on the NDE website. During today's webinar, we will first provide an overview of the local Food for Schools Cooperative Agreement Program, which will be referred to as LFS. We will move on to cover who is eligible to receive funding and the opting in process, allowable versus unallowable costs, program oversight and monitoring, and an overview of Farm to School. The Nebraska Department of Education has entered into a cooperative agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Services to administer the LFS. NDE has been allocated nearly $1.5 million in funding to directly subaward to eligible SFAs for the purchase of unprocessed or minimally processed domestic, locally grown foods from local producers, small businesses, and socially disadvantaged farmers and producers for the use in the school meals programs. The overall goals of the LFS program are to increase the amount and quantities of local and regional foods being purchased for the use in schools, to provide an opportunity to strengthen local and regional food systems, to help support local, small, and socially disadvantaged farmers and producers by building new economic opportunities and expanding existing ones, and to establish, strengthen, and broaden partnerships between farmers and producers to ensure distribution of fresh and nutritious foods for use in school meal programs continues. To be eligible for the LFS subaward, SFAs must participate in the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program. SFAs must also be located in one of the 4 Eastern Nebraska Economic Development Districts, which are highlighted on this slide. This includes both public and private school districts. SFAs must spend LFS funds at local and regional producers, otherwise known as eligible beneficiaries. This means SFAs should purchase allowable foods from those involved in the production and distribution of local domestic food, such as farmers, producers, processors, and distributors of local domestic product. SFAs are also required to target purchases from small businesses and socially disadvantaged farmers and producers to the extent practicable. So for the purpose of the LFS, local and regional produced food is defined as food that's raised, produced, aggregated, stored, processed, and distributed in the locality or region where the final product is marketed to consumers. Local and regional producers are defined as farmers, producers, ranchers, processors, and distributors which are located in the state of Nebraska or within 400 miles of the delivery destination. LFS funds must also target socially disadvantaged producers, farmers, ranchers, and small businesses. A socially disadvantaged group is a group whose members have been subject to discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, age, disability, sex, marital status, familial status, parental status, religion, sexual orientation, genetic information, political beliefs, reprisal, or if their income is partially or fully derived from a public assistance program. Additionally, a small business is defined as a for-profit business of any legal structure. This includes independently owned and operated, not nationally dominant in its field, and must physically be located and operated in the U.S. or in its territories. So this chart can be used to determine what food items are considered unprocessed or minimally processed. Allowable, unprocessed, or minimally processed domestic local food in a variety of minimally processed states and/or forms include whole, cut, pureed, fresh, frozen, canned, and dried. Examples of allowable foods include fluid milk, which can be unflavored or flavored, other dairy products such as cheese and yogurt, fruits and vegetables, which include 100% juices, whole grain-rich products such as pastas and rice, meats, which can be in the form of whole, pieces, or ground, eggs, and meat alternates such as beans and legumes. Unallowable foods that are generally understood to be significantly processed or prepared include pre-made, ready-to-eat foods, such as pre-made pizzas, breads, muffins, crackers, pre-packaged sandwiches, cereal, chicken nuggets, and breaded meat items. Produce seeds are considered an unallowable purchase through LFS funds. So all eligible SFAs will be emailed an opt-in survey on April 20th from Katie Parch. This survey is used to determine what school districts are interested in receiving all or partial LFS funds, along with any schools wishing to deny the funds. The opt-in survey will be open until May 10th, giving districts 2 weeks to complete. The opt-in survey will ask for your SFA's agreement number, which can be found in the top left corner of your school's CNP application, your first and last name, and whether or not your institution chooses to opt into the LFS grant and accept the full allocated amount. Each SFA allocated amount is currently made available on the LFS webpage. And as a reminder, these allocated amounts are approximations, and they could be increased by a small value if SFAs choose to decline the funds, therefore returning their allocation to the pool for distribution to SFAs that do accept the funds. As noted previously, the opt-in survey opens tomorrow, April 20th, and closes May 10th. Each SFA which chooses to opt into the LFS program will receive a grant award notification, known as a GAN, as early as July 1st, 2023. The GAN will include your SFA's allocated LFS funds for the first allocation period. This is the total amount that your school will be subawarded. Once you receive your GAN, you will begin purchasing local food to use in the National School Lunch Program or School Breakfast Program. These funds cannot be used during any summer food service program, so be mindful if you do choose to purchase foods over the summer months, as they would need to be frozen or shelf stable so they don't expire before the school year. This can also include processing foods on your own, such as blanching and freezing fresh local green beans. Through our agreement with the USDA, SFAs that choose to participate in the LFS program will be reimbursed for local and regional food purchased during the school year. This requires SFAs to submit quarterly reimbursement requests to NDE Nutrition Services. The deadline to submit reimbursement requests is noted on this slide and also posted in the LFS FAQ, which can be found on the LFS website. So SFAs will be required to report the following information on the quarterly reimbursement submission spreadsheet: an invoice date, the vendor, the secondary source if the farm or the producer is not the vendor. They will need to confirm if the source is from a small business, indicate if the producer is socially disadvantaged, any delivery miles if outside of Nebraska, if this is the first time the SFA has purchased from this producer, if you plan to purchase from them again, along with the item quantity, the unit, total price on the invoice, and estimated pounds. On the next slide, we will review a reimbursement request example. Okay, so let's run through a couple reimbursement examples. As a reminder, each reimbursement request needs to be completed quarterly. You may have a lot of vendors and skipping lines is not required. In the first column, you will record the invoice date or when you received the product from a local farm or producer. The next two columns document the vendor or source where the products were purchased. The vendor would be where you directly purchased the product. So for example, if you purchased from a farmer's market, you would document the farmer's market as the vendor. The secondary source is the actual farm or producer you purchased from at the farmer's market, such as Smith Farms. In some cases, you may purchase directly from a producer or farm. If so, a secondary source is not required. As a reminder, you must target purchases from small businesses and socially disadvantaged farmers or producers, and these responses are required to be documented on the reimbursement request. You only need to document delivery miles if the producer is outside the state of Nebraska. On the first line in the example, you can see that 6 crimson sweet watermelons were purchased for $50, and altogether they weighed about 120 pounds. When documenting the items purchased, try to be specific as possible. The total price for each item will automatically add together and provide a total at the bottom of the page. This total is the amount that you will be reimbursed quarterly. This example is made available on the reimbursement request, so you can revisit when you complete the request yourself. Each SFA will receive a reimbursement request template for submitting a reimbursement request. Reimbursement requests must be submitted quarterly, and a new spreadsheet must be used each quarter. To submit your reimbursement spreadsheet, you will email the completed template to nte.lfs@nebraska.gov. And as a reminder, these retain all submitted reimbursement requests for 3 years in support during administrative reviews. I will now pass on to Sarah Smith to discuss some important farm to school information.
Thanks, Taylor. Nice to see everyone today. Thanks for joining. When you have some questions that come up, the bulk of the information about the local Food for Schools funding has been presented, so please don't hesitate to drop questions in the chat box at any time, and we'll wrap up some of these additional slides and then we can address your questions. So for those of you that are familiar, this might not be totally new information, but the opportunity to purchase food with the LFS dollars is really inherently a farm to school activity, is kind of how we're defining farm to school at the national level and at the state level. And when we look at farm to school, we have these 3 components: the education, where we see students working on tower gardens or doing farm visits. We see students working in school greenhouses or school gardens. And then the key piece here that we're talking about today is how you are all involved in serving children meals with procurement. And so this is our opportunity to use additional dollars that are being provided at this time for the purchase of these local foods. So we're kind of discussing the local Food for Schools funding through the lens of farm to school. Next slide. And so we wanted to just help get your brains thinking through, okay, so what are some ways to promote if we are purchasing local foods with local Food for Schools funding? And so there are existing programs that NDE supports and is implementing with many materials that are available to you to download and utilize in your school meals program. So one program that might be of interest that could help frame out ideas for spending these funds could be our Harvest of the Month program. So this program features a local food item when in season. So right now you could use some of our materials on asparagus, for instance. I know I have asparagus growing in my garden. If you are not muted, if you could take a second to mute yourself, that would be great. Here. Okay, all right, here we go. These materials help to teach about seasonality and also to promote how you're utilizing the foods in your meals program. So right now we have a slate of about 15 items, but we're continuing to grow these materials with additional products. And with each product, there are posters available, trivia cards, communications toolkit. On the next slide, we can see the list of some of the items that we're expanding into. So this calendar poster is what's currently available on our website, but we're going to be making live a whole Indigenous foods portion of the Harvest of the Month materials, where we're adding in corn, squashes, dry beans, and native herbs specifically for the native foods piece. We're going to be adding for next year tomatoes, berries, radishes, and cucumbers, and also providing more materials on additional leafy greens. And we're also going to be including dairy, honey, and eggs in this slate of items. So these are all materials that if they're minimally processed or unprocessed, you could spend local food for schools funding on these foods and utilize some of these materials in your school meals program. Next slide, please. We also offer materials for promotion of the full plate with Nebraska Thursdays. And so this is definitely a program that's available statewide that we know schools are leveraging to promote grains or dairy or fruits, vegetables, meat or meat alternates, all of the components of that plate. So we encourage you to take a minute to learn more about that program as well. Next slide. Finally, in October, this could be a really interesting way to consider as you start to project your budget with the local Food for Schools funding, to consider joining a statewide competition. It's actually a competition that we have in the Mountain Plains region, so with 8 states, called the Crunch Off. So you see several pictures here of schools that have participated with apples. We've had FFA chapters that join, and they're doing bell peppers or they're doing pumpkin seeds. So this is an opportunity to sign up and participate in the Crunch Off and become part of a competition where we're teaching kids about a bigger movement of local foods. Everyone's crunching into this local item in the month of October and celebrating Farm to School Month as well. So we really love this program in Nebraska. We've actually been the champions 4 years in a row. We'd like to see that continue. But this would be an example of incorporating the crunch into your school lunch. And you can use your funding that you're receiving with local Food for Schools to leverage this program as well, as long as it's part of your school meals program. Next slide. And just keeping in mind that the federal side of things, there's good reason for providing these funds for schools as the largest buyer of foods in the country. So we're seeing that with more funding going into local Foods for Schools, that we're supporting our businesses and farmers in our state. We also know that there's an increased school meal participation, that children are seeing that with local food and promotion of local food, there's more interest in eating school meals. So that participation does increase with evidence-based research shows us that we see a reduction in food waste, more willingness to try new fruits and vegetables. You can incorporate this into school wellness policies, and we see that communities get behind this quite a bit as well. And so this is some encouragement to consider this an opportunity to explore using local foods in your school meals program. I think I have one last slide, Taylor. And so just to be considering, so while we have this opt-in survey opening this week, the funds would be available starting in July. We know the growing season has started now, and it is not too early now to reach out to local producers or grocers that carry local food items, visit farmers markets and that type of thing to start to find connections for these products. You can start doing this anytime and start planning for use of the products into the next school year. So this is just a picture of what we see, the production schedule for farmers, that they've already got some of these spring products that they're harvesting and they're planting and they're planning their production for their fields. And so if you have an idea of what you'd like to incorporate into your menus in August, September, October, November, and while these funds are available through the school year, now is a good time to be making those connections. And I think I have one more slide after this. And so again, ways to do that could be purchasing directly from the producers. You can work with a food hub or someone that's aggregating product together. You can purchase from a garden, even a school garden, and from farmers markets. We do have lots of possibilities for learning more about farm to school, including our website, the USDA Farm to School website, and the National Farm to School Network. These resources are all linked on the NDE Farm to School webpage as well, and we are available to help provide you with the most applicable resources that you're looking for as you explore growing farm to school or local food purchasing at your school. So Market Maker is a database that the Nebraska Extension has recently made live in Nebraska. And so we're really hoping that this database can be a good place for you to locate products and producers. They're also going to be encouraging schools to create your own profile in this database. And you would be able to list what products you're looking for, what you're most interested in, and the quantities and any specifications for those products as well. So in the fall or maybe even the summer, what we'll be doing is continuing to learn about this database, encouraging producers and venues, businesses, small businesses to upload profiles, and making you all aware of the process for this as well. So you're welcome to explore this. You're welcome to open a profile up at any time. We will be providing more specific information as we go into the fall. But I wanted to put this on your radar so you know there is a place to go to start looking for producers now. So it's a fairly new thing, but I think we'll see a lot of growth with Market Maker as a database to pull for institutional purposes. This is what that site would look like. You would actually select what you're looking for from a whole list of potential businesses. Next slide, Taylor. And you can register based off of the type of profile you are, the type of business you are. So you as a school buyer would be an institutional purchaser. Next slide, please. And that leads us into questions. Taylor, have you kept your eye on the chat box for some of these questions?
Sarah, I have a question back on this is Mary from UTAN. With the monies that we can see that are available, I've already reached out to my distributor in Iowa to find out who's within my 400-mile radius that they get stuff. I like the farmer's market idea. We already use Kelly's Produce for our watermelons, cucumbers, tomatoes, that kind of stuff in the fall months until the first freeze. But what if you're not sure you're going to use that full dollar amount? Are you able to select how much of, like, say you have, mine's like $3,800. Are we able to be real specific on the survey? Like I can look at last year's bill from Kelly and know what I spent for both schools.
Yes, thanks, Mary. Katie, I'm going to let you go ahead and address this question.
Hi, Mary. Are you wanting to know if you can put an amount less than your full allocation? Again, like you're using your historical information about your purchases from what we would normally determine, or what we would determine are allowable producers because of the locality?
Well, yes, but I'm not I would have to look to see what my bill was this last fall. But if I don't, 3,800 seems like a lot for local produce for where I'm located.
Sure. If it were me, I would accept the full amount. And if you identify opportunities to purchase different kinds of items from qualifying producers, then you know you sort of got this little bit, this flexible amount, well, additional like cushion, icing on the cake kind of. And whatever you don't end up requesting in reimbursement is okay. You know, there's like a 2-round sort of funding plan that we have. So it'll go back into the pot and be made available again in the second round. But I would accept the full amount if you think there's a chance that you might use more than what you traditionally would have purchased. Yeah.
Perfect.
Question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Katie, how about this question we have in the chat box from Jane? Is the processing of donated beef and/or pork an allowable cost?
Such a good question. Well, let's go back to the basics, or I guess the intent of the funds, which is to support those small and mid-sized producers. And if we're utilizing the funds to pay for processing of donated items for which the producer didn't receive any of this financial support, then the answer to that question is going to be no, right? Again, go back to the intent of the purpose and intent of the funds. It's to provide some financial support and stability to small producers that we want them to get like a foothold into this school meals market so that they can become like sustainable sort of partners in selling you meal items for your school meals. And we've got to give them some money so that they can continue to be financially viable. And that is the intended purpose of the program. So processing fees for donated items are not allowable use of the local food for schools funds. Good question.
Thank you, Katie. Another question here is, what happens if you are unable to use the full allotted amount that you accept? And I think you addressed that. Anything you want to add to that, Katie, from what you answered before?
I don't think so. Carrie, do you feel like the answer that we provided to Mary also answers your question?
Okay.
Or
I get a thumbs up there.
okay.
Okay, very good. All right. How about milk? Would this be an allowable cost?
I think the answer is it depends, right? You know this so well, Taylor and Sarah both, but the qualifications for like small sized business probably is not Highland Dairy. And I'm guessing that's where most schools in this area of Nebraska are able to get their milk from, or maybe Dean Foods. And I feel pretty confident that both of those are not going to qualify as like a small, maybe socially disadvantaged kind of producer.
I would agree with that. Jane, does that answer your question there? Milk is allowable if it's minimally processed, which it is, but because the funding is intended specifically for small businesses, if the milk is from a vendor that is not a small business, then it would not be an allowable item.
Good answer.
Okay, while we wait and see if more questions come in, Taylor did drop a Google form link into the chat box. And for those folks that opt in to Local Food for Schools, this webinar will be required, having some good information about utilization of the funds. So this is how we will be tracking that. So if you could please make sure that you open the Google Doc, you are able to access it, and you can put your information in there, that would be great so we can track that you participated. If you have any issues, you can of course email us as well. It looks like the Google Doc is not letting everyone in.
Sorry about that. I thought I put it as public, so I will resend that link.
Okay. All right, what other questions? Did I miss a question in here at all?
So what an idea I'm just thinking about when you were talking the farmers markets and stuff, Sarah, we've got a dairy out by Wahoo. So if I was able to get cream and do like a little education thing, or our science class, like junior high always does the cream into butter, is that something? Or does it have to be just exact? It would have to be something I had to do at lunch, right? With the National School Lunch Program. Katie's shaking her head. Okay, yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Exactly. There might, yeah. That's the regulatory part of this, is that it has to be utilized in the National School Lunch Program.
Serve it at lunch.
We'll find mini grants to buy some cream and make butter sometime soon. How about that? All right, is anyone having luck with that Google Doc? Not yet.
Not yet, huh? While I try to figure that out, we do have a poll that I wanted to do really quickly. So if you guys wouldn't mind answering this poll question, and hopefully by the time you answer it, I can get this Google document working.
Okay, so the market meetups, you all, are some networking events that we've hosted. Some of you have been to them. We offered one in Lincoln, one in Norfolk, and one in Omaha this spring. And we had pretty good turnout and found that we needed more time at these events for producers and school buyers to be meeting. But we would like to support you in connecting with local products as much as we can. And so what we're wondering is if you were to attend a market meetup, some kind of a networking event, which format would you be interested? Virtual, in person, or are you not sure if you would join at all? Okay, full results. Are they viewable, Taylor? Oh, great. Okay, so it looks like people would really appreciate in-person market meetups. That's good to know. Some virtual and some aren't sure if they would attend. So we'll stay in close touch as we continue to consider ways that we can support you in local purchasing. Taylor, do you want to wrap us up here?
Yes, so I will send out the Google Docs after this presentation. I don't know how to make it live, apparently. So everyone that was attended, I'll send out an email and you guys can fill it out afterwards. Yeah, if you have any questions, please reach out to myself, Sarah Smith, or Katie Parch with our information is here on the screen. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit with us and listen to this new opportunity. Really appreciate it.